I lay on the kitchen floor for 6 hours. No one called. No one knocked. And that's when I realized I wasn't fine. It didn't happen in some dramatic fall down the stairs. It was a quiet morning. I was just taking out the trash. The same thing I've done every Tuesday for years. But as I bent over to tie the bag, something in my lower back gave out. Not loud, not painful enough to scream. It was sharp, sudden, and I was down. The tile floor was cold beneath me. I remember staring up at the ceiling fan, the one Harold installed before he passed, and realizing slowly that I couldn't get up. And worse than the pain was the silence. No one knew I was there. I hadn't spoken to anyone that day, or the day before. My phone was across the room, face down. And I lay there thinking, if I pass out, this is it. I'll be the story someone tells about finding me too late. I didn't cry. I didn't panic. I just waited. And when I could, I rolled to my side, pushed myself upright with shaking hands, and made it to the chair. Sat. Breathe. I told myself I was lucky. I made tea like I always do. Took a Tylenol. And said those words out loud just to prove I could. I'm fine. But I wasn't. Not really. That day didn't break me. But it opened a door. Quiet one. The kind you pretend not to see. Behind it were all the signs I'd been ignoring. The ones that don't shout but whisper. You might need help. Even if you think you're doing just fine. This isn't about weakness. Or failure. This is about noticing the small changes before they become the big ones. So if you've ever caught yourself brushing off something small, something strange, or something just a little too quiet, stay with me. Because the signs are easy to miss, until you can't anymore. Sign number 1. You can't remember the last time you truly laughed. It was about a week after the fall. I was watching one of those old black and white comedies Harold used to love. The kind with corny one-liners and piano background music. I sat there with my tea, eyes on the screen, and realized something halfway through. I hadn't laughed. Not once. Not even a smile. Just silence. Me and a TV full of jokes that used to make me chuckle out loud. That night, I tried to remember the last time I laughed so hard my chest hurt. The kind of laugh that makes you lean forward, wipe your eyes, forget yourself for a minute. But no memory came. I remembered people. I remembered moments. But the feeling, that bubbling, unexpected joy, it had been gone longer than I realized. And I thought maybe that's just what getting older is. Fewer surprises, less excitement, fewer people to laugh with. But then I read something from a study out of Stanford. It said that one of the earliest signs of emotional withdrawal in older adults isn't sadness. It's the quiet loss of spontaneous joy. That the brain stops reaching for the pleasure moments when it's too used to going without them. That laughter disappears long before tears ever show up. And that hit me harder than the fall. Because losing laughter doesn't feel urgent. It's not a crisis. No one checks on you because you haven't giggled lately. But in your heart something knows. Something goes still. And you start to live a life where everything is just fine. But nothing is truly warm. I started noticing it more after that. I'd watch something funny, and wait for the laugh that never came. I'd see a neighbor walking their silly little pug in a sweater, and instead of smiling, I'd just nod and keep walking. I wasn't upset. I wasn't angry. I just wasn't feeling much at all. And that, I realized, was the sign. Not crying, not falling, but forgetting what it feels like to laugh. Not because you're numb, but because the joy has quietly slipped away. So if you found yourself staring at something you used to love and feeling nothing, please don't brush it off. It might just be the first whisper your heart sends out, hoping someone still hears it. Sign number 2. You've become too good at pretending you're fine. The calls come every Sunday just like clockwork. My daughter, bless her, always checks in. Hi Mom, how are you? And I always answer the same way. Doing great, honey. Just got back from a walk. Made myself some soup. You. My voice is cheerful, upbeat, confident. I even smile when I talk, though no one sees me. What she doesn't know is that the walk was just to the mailbox and back. That the soup was canned. That I'd been sitting in silence all morning, watching the steam rise from my cup just to feel like something was moving. And it's not her fault. She believes me because I've gotten good at it. You see, loneliness doesn't always look like someone curled up crying in the dark. Sometimes it looks like a strong voice, a clean kitchen, and a perfectly timed laugh. There's a quiet skill we develop when we live alone long enough. The skill of making others feel like we're okay. Not because we want to lie, but because we don't want them to worry. Because saying, "I'm struggling," feels heavier than silence. Because admitting we're not okay might lead to help. And help, if we're honest, can feel like weakness. But here's what I've learned. When you spend more time crafting the illusion of peace than actually feeling it, something in you begins to wear thin. There's a study from the National Institute on Aging that says adults over 65 who suppress negative emotions consistently, especially when interacting with family, are at a significantly higher risk of cognitive fatigue and depression. Not because they're sad all the time, but because they're constantly performing wellness. And I felt that deeply. Some days I'd finish a call and sit in silence for an hour, too tired to move. Not from the conversation, but from pretending. So if you're listening to this, and your smile on the phone has started to feel like a costume, if you've mastered the art of sounding fine, you might already be more tired than you realize. Because emotional exhaustion doesn't knock. It just settles in quietly behind every "I'm okay" you whisper into the void. Sign number 3. You've quietly made a list of what happens if I'm gone. I never wrote it down. Not officially. But the list is there. Tucked somewhere between my daily habits and the silence I don't talk about. Started with small thoughts. Who would feed the cat if something happened to me? Would anyone know how to unlock the front gate? Then came bigger ones. Where did I leave the spare house key? Would anyone even think to check on me if I didn't answer the phone for a few days? And somewhere along the way the list grew. Not in panic, but in quiet, methodical order. I started putting labels on the boxes in the attic. I organized the folder with my will. I made a copy of my medication list and slid it into the kitchen drawer, just in case paramedics ever came. I told myself it was just being responsible, just staying prepared. But deep down I knew what it really was. It was my way of whispering to the world. If I disappear, please don't let it be messy. No one told me to do it. No one asked. And I never shared it. Not with my daughter, not with my friends. 'Cause how do you bring that up in conversation? By the way, here's what to do if I die alone in this house. Don't. So you keep it inside. And slowly, that quiet preparation becomes a part of your routine. Not from fear, but from the unspoken understanding that, when you live alone, you become your own backup plan. There's a study from the University of Chicago that found over 40% of older adults living alone have, at some point, made informal end-of-life plans without telling their family. Not because they've given up, but because they don't want to be a burden, even after they're gone. And while it sounds practical, it's also profoundly lonely. Because when you spend more time planning your absence than nurturing your presence, you're no longer living in the moment. You're living in the shadow of your own goodbye. So if you've caught yourself thinking, more than once, about how to make things easier just in case, that might be your heart telling you it's been carrying too much on its own. We're not meant to disappear quietly. We're meant to be held, remembered, and more than anything, checked in on while we're still here. Sign number 4. You sleep too much. Or not at all. I used to be a morning person. Harold used to tease me for it. Said I woke up before the birds just to boss them around. Back then I had a rhythm. Wake up, open the blinds, coffee, newspaper, a walk before the sun got too high. Now, some mornings I don't get out of bed until noon. Not because I'm sick. Not because I'm tired. But because I just don't see the point of starting the day early anymore. And other nights, I lie awake with the TV off, the room quiet, my thoughts loud. I stare at the ceiling and wonder why sleep won't come, even though my body aches for it. I count the hours until morning like they're weights I have to carry across the dark. What used to be rest has turned into escape. Or avoidance. And it's strange, isn't it? How sleep, that one place we used to go to reset, can become either too much or too far out of reach. Sometimes I sleep 10 hours straight, wake up groggy, float through the day like I never fully arrived. Other times I sleep 2 hours, then pace the kitchen at 3 a.m., making tea I don't drink, just to feel like someone is awake with me. But what I've learned, and what they don't often tell you, is that disrupted sleep isn't always about the body. Sometimes it's the soul that's tired, or the mind that won't stop rehearsing regrets in the dark. There's a study from the Mayo Clinic that says irregular sleep patterns in older adults are often tied not to physical fatigue, but to emotional disconnection. When there's no reason to wake up, and too much weight to fall asleep, you get caught in the in-between, not resting, not living, just drifting, and no one sees it. You still answer the phone, still smile when someone calls, but your body is speaking in ways your words never will. So if your mornings feel heavy, and your nights stretch on too long, if your bed has become a hiding place or a battleground, that may be your heart trying to ask a question your mouth has never said out loud. Am I still needed? And if you've ever asked that in the dark, even just once, then maybe you already know the answer. Sign number 5. You avoid having visitors, and then pretend you're too busy. I used to love having people over. Back when Harold was alive, our house was always full. Sunday potlucks, grandkids running barefoot through the hallway, a pie in the oven, a chair pulled out just in case someone stopped by unannounced. But now, when the doorbell rings, I pause. I wait in silence, pretending I didn't hear it. Sometimes it's just a package. Other times it's a neighbor or someone from church. And I find myself standing still behind the curtain, hoping they go away before I have to make up a reason why I can't come to the door. It's not that I don't like people. It's not that I don't want company. It's that the thought of welcoming someone into this quiet, into this space that no longer feels lively, feels exposing. The kitchen's a little messy. The couch is covered in laundry. I'm still in my robe at 3 p.m. The dog hasn't been brushed in days. And beneath all of that, there's this whisper that says, if they see you like this, they'll think something's wrong. So instead I avoid. I let calls go to voicemail. I reply to texts hours later with, sorry, I've been so busy. But the truth is, I haven't been busy. I've just been hiding. There's a loneliness that doesn't scream. It retreats politely. It organizes the spice rack instead of answering the door. It folds excuses into throw pillows and tells itself, next week. I'll invite them next week. But next week turns into next month. And before you know it, you're a ghost in your own neighborhood. Psychologists call this social withdrawal by avoidance loop, a cycle where isolation leads to embarrassment, and embarrassment deepens the isolation. It's not fear of people. It's fear of being seen too clearly. Because when someone walks into your home, they don't just see your living room. They see your life. And if you're not proud of how it feels right now, not how it looks but how it feels, you'd rather not let anyone witness it. But here's the truth I had to learn. People don't care if there are dishes in the sink. They care if you're okay. So if you've been telling yourself you're too tired or too busy, when really you're just quietly folding deeper into yourself, maybe that's a sign. Not that you've failed, but that it's time to let someone in, even just for a cup of tea, and maybe 5 minutes of company that doesn't require a smile. Sign number 6. You stop reaching out, even when you need help. There was a time I'd call someone without thinking. A friend, a neighbor, even my daughter, just to ask, can you help me move this box? Or do you have a minute? It felt easy, natural, even comforting to know that I wasn't doing life alone. But something's shifted over the years. Now, even when I need help, I don't call. Not because I'm proud. Not even because I think I can handle it. But because I've convinced myself. They're probably busy. A few months ago, the light bulb in the hallway went out. I don't see well in the dark anymore, so every night I walk through that stretch carefully, using my phone flashlight or just memory. Changing the bulb would have taken 5 minutes. I have a neighbor who would have gladly helped. But I didn't ask. I told myself it wasn't worth the trouble. I told myself I'd get to it later. But really, I just didn't want to be seen needing something small. That's how it starts. This slow, silent retreat from asking. We stop reaching out because we've started believing that our needs are an inconvenience. That we're supposed to be low maintenance. That the best way to be loved is to never need too much. And the heartbreaking thing is, people stop offering. Not because they don't care, but because we've trained them to think we're okay. There's research from the University of Michigan that shows older adults who undercommunicate their needs are 3 times more likely to report feelings of emotional neglect. Not because others abandoned them, but because they made themselves invisible. I've lived that. There are days when the water heater acts up or the curtain rod falls, and I just stare at it, not with anger, but with that quiet sigh that says, "It's fine. I'll live with it." But what I've learned is this. Asking for help isn't a burden. It's an invitation. A reminder to the people who love you that they're allowed in. That they still matter. That you still matter. So if you've been swallowing your needs, silencing your aches, and telling yourself, "It's not worth the trouble," then maybe it's time to ask anyway. Not because you're weak, but because sometimes being human means being willing to say, "Can you come over for a moment?" And if you're lucky, someone will answer. Of course, I was just waiting for you to ask. It happened the day my neighbor's son brought me soup. I was battling a small cold. Nothing serious. I hadn't mentioned it to anyone. I was still getting around making my tea, doing the laundry. But I suppose he heard me coughing from across the yard. That afternoon, he knocked softly, handed me a warm container and said, "Mom said you might need this." Smiled. Thanked him. I set it on the counter like it was nothing. But when the door closed, I just stood there, staring at that little container of soup, and something in me broke open. Because it had been so long since someone did something for me, just because I wasn't feeling my best. So long since anyone noticed something was off without me having to say a word. So long since I was on the receiving end of care. And that's what this is really about, isn't it? Not the fall. Not the light bulb. Not the sleep or the silence or the small needs we push aside. It's about this quiet forgetting. The slow, almost invisible way we stop believing we're worth looking after. We get so used to being the one who holds everything together. For our children, our partners, our community. That when life slows down and the house goes quiet, we convince ourselves that needing care is something we've aged out of. But the truth is, we don't ever stop needing it. We just stop expecting it. And when that happens, something in the soul begins to shrink. Not from lack of love, but from the absence of reminders. So here's what I'll say, to you and to myself. You're not too old. You're not too much. You're not a burden. You are still worthy of a hand on your shoulder. A meal brought to your door. A call that asks nothing more than, "How are you really?" And if any part of this story has felt familiar, if you've nodded quietly, or felt a lump in your throat, then maybe it's time to stop saying, "I'm fine," and start saying, "I think I could use a little company," because you're not alone. Not really. Not anymore.